My sister, Olivia, knocked just after 8. She did not wait for me to answer. She pushed the door with a finger and walked in. Her fiancé, Jake, stayed in the rental car, engine idling, a grin set in the windshield like a sticker. Our parents, Margaret and Thomas, were already calling about flowers, chairs, and a second tasting because the first one felt a little New York and they wanted something more Boston. I told them I could help with errands after work. I believed in clean lines. My life, my bills, her wedding, her bills. Then I checked my phone and saw a shock so bold it seemed unreal. On my bank app sat a fresh charge for the full reception, $15,000, stamped on my statement like a dare. The number burned. I looked at Olivia, who was studying a framed photo of me on my porch the day I closed on the house. "Do you know anything about this?" I asked.
My voice stayed even.
Olivia tilted her head and smirked. "Emily, you don't have a family to support," she said, sweet as frosting. "You should cover it." I heard every letter. She did not say, "loser." Jake drummed the steering wheel outside like a countdown. The heat left my cheeks. A careful calm took its place. I thought about nights on late trains from New York, counting dollars, choosing rent before fun, learning how to stretch time and food. I thought about the first key in my hand and the way my feet knew this floor. I set my mug down and felt the small shake in my wrist up. "Then you'll love what comes next," I said. Olivia rolled her eyes and sank into my sofa. I stepped onto the porch, wrapped my sweater tight, and called the venue. The manager, Claire, answered with a steady voice. I explained that a charge had been placed on my card without consent and that I needed it reversed at once. She asked me to confirm details. I did. She said the balance would then be due by the end of the next day or the reception would be canceled. "Understood," I said, and thanked her for being direct. Inside, Olivia hummed and scrolled through photos of dresses and centerpieces, unaware. I rinsed my mug, let the water run, and felt something like a clean wind fill my chest. My card was mine again. My house held me like a hand. I thought of Europe for a second, a far shore with old stones, and then came back to where I stood. America was enough for this story.
So was I.
I told my sister I had errands. She nodded without looking up. On my way out, I left a note on the kitchen table. "Please do not use my name or my money for your wedding without my permission." It was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the first line of a new rule, written in my own hand, set down in a house I paid for in dollars, under a sky that asked I keep my word. By noon the next day, my phone felt like it had swallowed a hornet's nest. Calls stacked in a frantic column, 68 by the time I set it face down on the table in my blue house. Voicemails from Margaret and Thomas overlapped like they were running down the same hallway, shouting about duty and respect and how a family doesn't nickel and dime itself over a party. Texts from Jake filled with exclamation marks and the word deposit, followed by a photo of him in a suit as if tailoring could cover a balance. Olivia's messages swung from laughing emojis to long, shaking lines of apology that didn't use the word sorry. I made toast, buttered it slowly, and let the kettle rattle. The number I kept in my head was simple: $15,000, the cost of a lesson some of us were late to learn. At 1, there was a sharp knock, then my mother's voice through the door. "Emily, open up." I let Margaret and Thomas in and watched the winter from the porch sweep around them like a cape. The house felt smaller with their worry inside it, but it was still my house. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one I bought secondhand with my New York savings, and I poured tea into plain white cups. Margaret started first, her hands slicing the air. "You embarrassed your sister. You embarrassed us. This isn't how America sees a family," she said, as if an entire country were peering through my window to render judgment. Thomas stared at the floorboards I refinished myself and said it was just easier if you'd cover it, as if easier were the same as right. I listened. The kettle hissed. Outside, a delivery truck coughed and moved on. I didn't put the charge on my card, I said. I removed the charge that never should have been there.
The room settled into that sentence.
I told them about the call with Claire at the venue, about the deadline set for end of day, about how the bill belonged to the people who made the plan. I can help, I said, but I won't be treated like a walking wallet. If Olivia wants a reception, she can meet the venue like an adult and pay in dollars, not in favors. Margaret flinched at the word adult. Thomas asked if I understood how much had already been promised. Chairs, centerpieces, a bar package that Jake insisted on because it's Boston, not some budget town. I almost laughed then, thinking of every overtime shift I'd worked in New York, every late-night sandwich eaten on a stoop to save 20 pounds or $30.
I didn't laugh.
I let the tea warm my palms and kept my voice steady. When they left, the house relaxed, the way a shoulder drops after you set down a heavy bag. I walked room to room like I was counting blessings that couldn't be yanked by a cousin with a spreadsheet. In the living room, the quilt our grandmother stitched in Philadelphia lay folded on the couch. In the hallway, the paint still smelled faintly of the weekend I redid the trim. I thought of Olivia as a kid in Chicago when storms shook the windows and she crept into my bed without asking. I thought of how easy it is to confuse love with rescue and rescue with debt. Claire called just after 3 to confirm the balance still due by 5. "We've notified the couple," she said, her voice calm, the way bridges sound when they hold. "All right," I said. "Thank you for being clear." At 4, the messages turned frantic. Jake claimed a bank hold. Margaret warned the venue would blacklist our name, as if Boston carried a book of shame. Thomas sent a short text, "Come on, M," and nothing else. Then Olivia called, and I let it ring twice before I picked up.
Her voice was raw. "Please fix it," she said.
I looked at the sunlight sliding across my kitchen floor, at the cup ring on the table I still hadn't sanded out, at the proof of my own choices in every corner. "I'm not fixing it," I said, "but I'll help you choose." I offered 2 real paths, a smaller room today with a fair split and a lower price, or a backyard party next month at my house with a clear budget and no tricks. The line went very quiet, as if the city itself leaned in to listen. "I'll call you back," Olivia whispered. I hung up, set my phone down, and let the clock do what clocks in America always do, keep honest time. At 3:10 p.m., Claire called while I stood by the front window of my blue house, watching Boston light thin across the street. Her voice was steady, the kind of steady that made bridges possible. "Emily," she said, "I wanted you to know the account for Olivia, and Jake still shows a balance due by 5 o'clock. They've tried to present a cashier's check, but there's a hold. As it stands, they're short by $2,300. I pressed my palm to the cool glass and looked at my porch, at the paint I bought with overtime dollars from New York years ago. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My heart beat hard but even. I had no plan to rescue anyone. I had a plan to be clear. I called Olivia, and she picked up so fast it was like she'd been staring at my name. Her breath came in little broken runs. "They say the money won't clear until next week," she said. "Jake is at the bank. Mom is arguing with Claire about community courtesy. Dad keeps asking if there's some way to float it.
Please, M.
Please fix it." I let her words settle like snow and didn't move until they stopped falling. "I won't fix it," I said, "but I will make the choice simple." I told her the same 2 paths I'd offered that morning. Move to the smaller room today, lower the cost, split it fairly in real dollars before 5. Or postpone the big party, and we do a backyard reception at my house next month with a clear budget and receipts everyone sees. "No secrets," I said. "No surprise swipes. We write the numbers in ink." By 3:40, Margaret arrived at my door with Thomas behind her, both of them carrying the wind with them. My house felt too bright for their worry, but it was still mine. We stood in the kitchen where the floor leans a little toward the back door. "You're leaving your sister to be humiliated," Margaret said, hands tight around her phone. I poured water into the kettle and set it on the flame. No, I said. I'm leaving my sister her dignity. That includes the dignity to pay for what she plans. Thomas tried for gentleness. Could you just front them $2,300 until the bank clears? I shook my head. I won't turn my house into a loan office. But I'll host them, feed them, set up lights, and call a band from New York I know will play for $800 if we give them pie. Margaret blinked. Pie. Yes, I said. Actual pie. Actual budget. Actual family. At 4:18, Jake texted a photo of the cashier's check with a caption that read, "We're good," like a charm against math. At 4:27, Claire called again.
They're still short, she said.
I've moved as many things as I can. The small room is open, but we need a signed addendum and full payment on the adjusted total, $9,200. We can take 4 cards at the desk. I did the numbers out loud so no one could pretend they didn't hear. For people at $2,300 each, Olivia, Jake, Mom, Dad. The line was quiet. I could feel the weight of their pride the way you feel an old house settle at night. And one more thing, I added, looking at the framed photo of me on my porch the day I carry the keys inside. Each of you writes me a note that says you won't use my name, my credit, or my address to buy what you can't afford. Not again. Not for anything. At 4:41, I walked to the venue because I wanted my feet on Boston ground while the clock ran. The air tasted like metal and river. When I entered, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and hope. Claire met me with the look of someone who has seen every version of family and still believes in kindness. Olivia stood near the desk with mascara tracks on her cheeks, Jake tapping a foot like impatience could print money, Margaret whispering into her phone, Thomas holding his wallet like it might speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain dignity or dollars. I slid a pen across the counter toward Olivia. Small room, I said. Sign, split, and pay $2,300 each by 5. Or we go home and plan something true. She looked at me for a long time, as if measuring whether I would bend. I didn't. At 4:56, 4 cards touched the counter. At 4:58, Claire nodded. At 5 o'clock, the clock on the lobby wall said the only thing I needed to hear. We had chosen, and the choice had been honest. The small room turned out to be a bright square with white walls, a low ceiling, and a dance floor that winked like a coin. By the time guests drifted in, the panic had drained from everyone's faces, replaced by a fragile kind of relief. The staff moved like a chorus, resetting tables and swapping out centerpieces without complaint. Claire gave me a small nod that said, plainly, this is what adults do. They choose, they pay, they proceed. The band the venue found at the last minute played standards from New York Nights, and my father, Thomas, loosened his tie during Fly Me to the Moon. Olivia looked at me across the room and lifted her glass, and for the first time that week, I saw the sister I remembered from road trips to Chicago, the one who sang harmony to keep me awake on long stretches of highway. I stayed near the back wall for a while, letting the room settle into itself, then stepped forward when Margaret tugged at my sleeve and said, with a small, shy smile, "Dance with your mother." Halfway through the evening, Jake found me near the bar and asked if I wanted anything. It was the first question he had aimed at me that wasn't about money. I asked for water, and he brought it with a napkin and a quiet apology that didn't curl into excuses. I got loud with Claire, he said. I shouldn't have. I nodded and said, "You fixed it with your card and your feet." He laughed at that, feet, not words, and admitted the walk from the bank back to the venue had felt like a mile of thinking. We stood shoulder to shoulder for a minute, looking at the little lights strung across the ceiling. "It's better like this," I said. Honest instead of grand.
He didn't argue.
He just said, honest costs less and somehow buys more, and the math of that was the first arithmetic we had ever agreed on. The toasts came short and bright. A friend from Philadelphia spoke about old houses, how they hold heat if you fix the windows and tell the truth. My father quoted a line he loves about storms and shelter and admitted, glancing my way, that he sometimes confuses quiet with weakness. Margaret kept her remarks simple, family is work, and added, to a round of soft laughter, and budgets. When it was Olivia's turn, she kept both hands on the mic like it might float away. I was cruel to my sister, she said. Ask her to pay for my dream when I hadn't done the saving. She gave me a boundary I needed. She gave me choices. Tonight is small, and it is perfect. She looked at me then, and I held her gaze without blinking. We have always been mirror and moon, catching each other's light when the sky was stingy. A month later, we did the backyard party at my blue house in Boston, because promises mean more when they're kept. We ran string lights from the maple to the back fence and rented a small speaker for $120. The band from New York, the one I had mentioned in my stubborn hour, drove up in a wagon with a dented door and played for $800, plus slices of apple pie and a pan of brownies my neighbor, Sarah, left on the porch with a note. Olivia and Jake brought folding chairs they found for $60, proud of the receipt. Margaret arrived early with a basket of tea lights and, without a speech, swept the porch and straightened the quilt. Thomas made lemonade and measured ice like a chemist. We kept the budget on a sheet of paper taped to the fridge, $4, $200 in neat lines, and settled every last dollar before the music started. No whispers, no secret swipes, just names and numbers and the ease that follows them. Near midnight, when the maple leaves shook in a soft American wind and the music thinned into slow songs, Olivia leaned on the rail and said, I used to think love was big gestures. Europe trains, glittering rooms, the most expensive bottle. Now I think it's this. Lights on a string, bills split 4 ways, a sister who says no and shows up anyway. Jake wrapped an arm around her shoulders and asked if I'd help them budget for their first year. We'll pay you, he said, and I shook my head. You'll pay the mortgage and the groceries, I said. You'll pay attention. That's enough. He laughed, and for once it didn't feel like a cover. It felt like a promise. When the last guests left, we stacked chairs and counted forks, and the house settled around us. I walked the quiet rooms, kitchen, hallway, living room, and touched the edges of my life. The painted trim, the porch light, the ledger with clean checks. This is America, I thought, not because of flags or fireworks, but because of the ordinary freedoms I had claimed. To say yes with a budget, to say no with a smile, to steady my own feet on my own porch. Olivia kissed my cheek at the door. I won't forget, she whispered. Neither will I almost said, but I didn't. Some lessons are paid once, in clear dollars, and then they live as light,